Picture this. You wake up one morning to find a 6-foot-deep trench carved around your entire property, like some kind of prison moat, and the HOA president is standing there with a shovel, smiling. That's exactly what happened to me. I stepped outside for my morning coffee, and suddenly I was trapped on my own land. No way to get my truck out, no way for emergency vehicles to reach me. Just me, my house, and a massive dirt barrier that had appeared overnight like a psychotic landscaping project. The smell of diesel exhaust still hung in the air as the construction workers fled the scene. But what really made my blood boil was seeing Bethany Cromwell, our neighborhood's self-appointed queen, directing the whole operation at dawn like she owned the place. Too bad for her. My security cameras caught every shovelful. My name is Marcus Whitfield. 6 months earlier, after 22 years as an Army electrician and a divorce that left me broken, I inherited my grandmother's place in Pinedale, Colorado, 2 acres of mountain sanctuary with a 1940s farmhouse that still carried the ghost of her cinnamon rolls. Every morning I'd sit on the wraparound porch with my coffee, listening to pine needles crunch under deer hooves and breathing air so pure it made Phoenix feel like sucking exhaust fumes. The scent of pine sap and morning frost reminded me why my grandmother never left this place. She had built something permanent here, something real. I should have known it was too good to last. Then came Bethany Cromwell, 45 years old, armed with a real estate license and the personality of a piranha in a Prada suit. She drove a white BMW SUV with custom plates and carried herself like she'd personally invented mountain living. She'd moved to Pinedale just 3 years earlier, but acted like she'd founded the town. The sound of her designer heels clicking across my wooden porch became the soundtrack to my personal hell. She controlled our 4-person HOA board through pure intimidation, turning neighborhood meetings into her personal courtroom. I watched her reduce a 70-year-old retiree to tears over a mailbox that was supposedly 3 inches too tall. That should have been my warning. The first violation notice appeared on my door like a death sentence. Non-conforming structures must be removed within 30 days. They wanted me to demolish my grandmother's chicken coop and tool shed, buildings that had weathered 40 Colorado winters while Bethany was probably still in diapers. The fine was $150 per day, starting immediately. I laughed at first. Had to be a mistake, right? Wrong. Weekly inspections started right away. Bethany would arrive unannounced with her measuring tape and camera, documenting everything from my work truck in my own driveway to individual blades of grass she deemed excessive. Her cloying perfume would linger in the mountain air for hours after each visit, like she was marking territory. Then came the anonymous complaints, noise violations when I used power tools at noon on weekdays, reports of suspicious activity when neighbors stopped by for help with electrical problems. One complaint even claimed my grandmother's 40-year-old oak tree was a visual obstruction that lowered property values. But I wasn't her only target. She was systematically terrorizing every original family in our 47-home development. Harold next door got violation notices for his wife's memorial garden. Sarah Chun faced $500 monthly fines for her kid's swing set. 3 families had already sold and fled rather than fight her legal warfare. I spent my first weekend researching county codes at the courthouse, surrounded by the musty smell of old records and growing fury. Every one of my grandmother's structures was completely legal, grandfathered in decades before any HOA existed. I sent Bethany a certified letter with copies of all the documentation. She responded by doubling my fines. That's when I started digging into the HOA's formation documents. Army intelligence training dies hard, and something about her paperwork stunk. Sure enough, the property boundaries in her incorporation filing were wrong, off by 50 feet in multiple places. More importantly, according to my grandmother's original deed and every county survey, my land had never legally been included in any HOA jurisdiction. Bethany had been collecting fines for property she had zero authority over. My second certified letter explaining this inconvenient legal fact got silence, followed by escalation. I realized this wasn't about neighborhood standards or property values. This was about control intimidation, and systematic theft disguised as civic duty. Bethany Cromwell wanted a war. Fine, but she had just declared hostilities against the wrong veteran. 2 weeks after my second ignored letter, she escalated to nuclear. I came home from a job site to find a county code enforcement officer in my driveway. He told me he was there about complaints regarding an illegal auto repair business operating on my property. I stared at him. Auto repair business. I'm an electrician. He showed me the complaint form, complete with photographs that made my workshop look like a chop shop. The pictures showed multiple vehicles in my driveway, tools scattered around, and what appeared to be commercial-level automotive work in progress. Never mind that the vehicles were actually my neighbors, Harold's truck and Sarah Chen's minivan, both getting simple electrical repairs as neighborly favors. The photos were clever, taken from angles that had context, cropped, and time-stamped during the exact moment my daughter was visiting with her boyfriend's pickup truck. She'd turned 3 neighbors helping each other into evidence of a criminal enterprise. The inspector was sympathetic, but had to follow up. 20 minutes later, he admitted there was obviously no auto repair business, but the damage was done. Bethany had established a pattern of suspicious commercial activity in the county records. That afternoon, I drove to an electronics store and bought 8 security cameras with cloud storage and motion alerts. If she wanted to play photography games, I'd give her high-definition reality. The installation took 3 days of careful wiring and positioning. I made sure every inch of my property line was covered, with special attention to areas where previous inspections had occurred. The cameras were professional-grade, night vision capable, and completely legal since they only monitored my own property. The first payoff came within a week. My phone buzzed with a motion alert at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I opened the app, expecting to see a deer or Harold walking his dog. Instead, I watched Bethany creeping around my backyard in the pre-dawn darkness, photographing my workshop windows with a telephoto lens. The audio was crystal clear. If I can get pictures of electrical equipment, I can claim he's running unlicensed contracting work. I had her dead to rights, trespassing while plotting her next false complaint. But instead of confronting her, I decided to let her dig her own grave deeper. Over the next month, my cameras captured a symphony of harassment. She appeared on my property 14 separate times, always before sunrise or after dark, measuring fence posts, photographing my electrical meter, even collecting soil samples from my garden, presumably looking for environmental violations. The diesel smell that had started lingering around my property finally made sense when I caught her boyfriend's excavation company surveying my property lines with professional equipment. They were taking measurements, driving stakes, and having heated discussions about easement access and utility corridors. But the real breakthrough came when I researched property records at the courthouse. Harold mentioned in passing that the previous owner of my house had sold for $40,000 below market value 2 years earlier, claiming he couldn't handle the stress anymore. The records told a story that made my stomach turn. Same pattern: violation notices, fines, harassment campaigns, and eventually a forced sale. The buyer: Cromwell Properties, LLC, Bethany's real estate company. She had done this before, multiple times. 6 houses in our development had sold below market value after extended disputes with the HOA. All 6 had been purchased directly or indirectly by companies connected to Bethany or her husband. This wasn't about neighborhood standards. This was systematic property theft disguised as community improvement. My cameras had caught her trespassing. My research had revealed her pattern. But I needed more evidence before making my move. So I called Harold over for coffee. I showed him the security footage. His weathered hands shook slightly as he watched Bethany skulking around my property in the darkness. "Since the day she moved in, son," he said. "Since the very first day. The war was no longer just about my property. It was about saving our entire community from a predator in designer clothing." Over the next few days, I learned the true scope of her operation. Harold told me how she destroyed Margaret's memorial garden, 30 years of roses his wife had cultivated, while he was buying groceries. Bethany claimed they violated uniform landscaping standards and had them ripped out. But she wasn't done. An emergency injunction arrived at 6 a.m. One Thursday, served by a sheriff's deputy who looked apologetic. According to the court papers, I was now prohibited from conducting any electrical work on my property for 30 days due to fire hazard concerns raised by multiple concerned neighbors. The hearing had been held the previous afternoon without my knowledge or presence. Bethany had presented 3 expert witnesses, all lawyers from her husband's firm, who testified that my electrical work posed imminent danger to the entire neighborhood. She'd even provided signed statements from neighbors expressing fear for their safety, but I recognized exactly 0 of the signatures. The immediate impact was devastating. $8,000 in scheduled electrical jobs gone. My kitchen renovation sat half-finished, exposed wires dangling like broken promises. Meanwhile, Bethany spread rumors that painted me as an unstable veteran threatening innocent families. That cloying perfume of hers seemed to follow me everywhere in town now. That's when I hired Diane Kozlowski, a retired sheriff's detective who had seen every dirty trick in the book. Her first discovery made my stomach drop. "Your HOA president has been very busy," she said, spreading financial records across my dining room table. Cromwell Properties had bought 6 homes in this development over 2 years, all 15 to 30% below market value. The pattern was surgical. Target original families with harassment campaigns, generate crushing legal costs through fraudulent complaints, force desperate sales at discount prices, then flip the properties to wealthy newcomers at full market value. $300,000 in commissions from 4 sales, not counting flip profits. But the corruption network went deeper. The county inspector who investigated my supposed auto repair business. Bethany's college roommate. The judge who granted the emergency restraining order without notifying me. Golf buddies with Bethany's husband. The city councilman fast-tracking her complaints. Her brother-in-law. This wasn't neighborhood harassment. It was organized crime wearing a municipal badge. Bethany escalated by demanding I remove all security cameras within 48 hours, claiming they violated privacy rights. When I refused, she threatened another lawsuit for stalking and harassment. Her boyfriend's construction crew started daily boundary surveys at dawn. Hydraulic machinery whining, blocking my driveway with equipment under the guise of emergency repairs to HOA common areas that somehow always happened exactly where I needed to drive. But she made a fatal mistake. She filed a lawsuit demanding $100,000 for emotional distress for being constantly surveilled. Here's where my research into HOA law paid off. Her own HOA bylaws specifically authorize security cameras for community protection. I had copies of emails where Bethany personally approved camera installations for 3 neighborhood allies. Her privacy lawsuit directly contradicted her own association's rules. In legal terms, that's selective enforcement, and it opens the door to discrimination claims that can destroy an entire HOA structure. Diane captured perfect evidence of this hypocrisy. Security footage of Bethany helping install cameras at her best friend's house just 2 weeks before demanding I remove mine. But the real breakthrough came when Diane's surveillance caught audio gold during a late-night conversation in Bethany's driveway. Mountain air carries sound cleaner, sharper, with nowhere for secrets to hide. "Once we eliminate these stubborn old families," she said, "we'll control the mineral rights to the entire development." Mineral rights. That phrase hit me like a sniper's bullet. This wasn't about neighborhood standards or property values. Bethany was systematically stealing land that potentially contained millions of dollars in natural gas deposits. Every forced sale consolidated more mineral rights under her control. My grandmother's 2 acres weren't just my inheritance. They were sitting on a fortune that Bethany would kill for. The morning I discovered the trench will haunt me forever. I had fallen asleep reviewing mineral rights documents until 2 a.m. When my phone started buzzing with motion alerts at dawn, I figured it was just deer. I was wrong. I stumbled onto my porch with coffee in hand and stopped cold. A 6-foot-deep moat carved around my entire property perimeter. Fresh earth piled high like fortress walls. Heavy machinery still rumbling in the distance. Yellow hard hats scrambling to pack equipment into trucks marked Cromwell Excavation, LLC. The smell hit me next, diesel exhaust mixed with churned earth and my own fear. because I suddenly understood what being truly trapped felt like. My security cameras had captured the whole operation. 5 hours of footage showing Bethany directing an excavation crew like a deranged battlefield commander, wearing a designer hard hat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The audio was crystal clear. Make sure it's deep enough that he can't drive out. That should teach him to mess with us. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher said they'd send someone, but if it was a property dispute, I'd need to contact civil authorities. 20 minutes later, the fire chief arrived and delivered the knockout punch. Mr. Whitfield, your property is now inaccessible for emergency vehicles. Until this is resolved, we can't guarantee response times. Before I could process that, the same county inspector who'd investigated my auto repair business showed up, demanding I fill the trench immediately at my own expense, claiming it violated county safety codes. I protested, showing him the footage. He shrugged. Property owners responsible for all excavations on their land, regardless of who did the work. The trap was perfect. She had vandalized my property, then used county regulations to force me to pay for repairs. By noon, local news trucks were arriving. I gave Channel 7's Jenny Morrison the full story, complete with security footage and financial records Diane had uncovered. But when the story aired that evening, the headline read, "Neighborhood Dispute Turns Dangerous." They'd somehow painted me as an unstable hermit fighting progress, while Bethany appeared as a concerned community leader trying to maintain safety standards. That evening, Harold knocked on my door with a manila envelope thick as a phone book. "I've been documenting everything," he said. "Every violation notice, every threatening letter, every time they trespassed. 3 years of evidence, son." Sarah Chun arrived 20 minutes later with her own folder, forged HOA signatures. "I'm a bank fraud investigator," she said quietly. "I know fake signatures when I see them." As we spread documents across my kitchen table, the scope of Bethany's criminal enterprise became clear. She had been systematically forging property owners' signatures on HOA documents since day one. Every vote, every fee assessment, every rule change, all based on fraudulent paperwork. From my military intelligence days, I remembered that document fraud was federal jurisdiction. Mail fraud, specifically, when those forged papers went through the postal system. The FBI doesn't mess around with organized schemes involving government agencies. The next morning, crews from her boyfriend's company returned overnight for utility line inspections. They severed my internet cables, claiming the lines violated county easement regulations. My phone service mysteriously went dead an hour later. The isolation was psychological warfare, cut off from communication, trapped behind an earthen wall, watching construction crews prowl my property line like predators. I climbed onto my roof to get cell service and called Diane. "They're accelerating the timeline," I told her. "Something big is coming." She had been tracking property records all night. "Marcus, you need to see this. Bethany's real estate company already has your house listed online as coming soon. Spectacular mountain views." The listing had gone live the day before the trench was even dug. They weren't just harassing me into leaving. They were already selling my inheritance out from under me. That afternoon, I noticed survey stakes appearing throughout the neighborhood. Not just on my property, but on Harold's land, Sarah's yard, even around the community areas. Bethany's excavation crews were marking every original family's property for boundary clarification. The trench around my house wasn't punishment. It was a preview, a demonstration of what would happen to anyone who continued resisting her land grab operation. As sunset painted the mountains blood red, I made a decision that would change everything. This war was no longer about my property rights or even my grandmother's legacy. Bethany was coming for every original family in this development, and someone had to make a stand. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. While I was digging through boxes of my grandmother's papers in the basement, desperate for anything that might save our community. The musty smell of old documents mixed with my growing desperation as I searched through decades of property records by flashlight. My power had been mysteriously disconnected for a safety inspection that afternoon. Then I found it. A manila envelope marked HOA Incorporation, important in my grandmother's careful handwriting. Inside were the original state filing documents for our homeowners association. My blood turned to ice water. Bethany had claimed unanimous consent from all property owners when incorporating the HOA. The signature page showed every landowner's name with what appeared to be their written approval. But my grandmother's signature was wrong, completely wrong. I'd seen Eleanor Whitfield's handwriting thousands of times, careful, precise, with a distinctive loop on the W and a flourish on the E. The signature on this document was crude, rushed, obviously forged. Someone had tried to copy her name from another document and failed miserably. My hand shook as I compared it to her real signature on a birthday card she'd sent me just months before her death. The difference was night and day. If Bethany had forged my grandmother's signature, what about the others? I called Harold at dawn. 20 minutes later, he was sitting at my kitchen table staring at the incorporation documents with growing fury. "That's not Margaret's signature either," he said, pointing to his deceased wife's name. "She never wrote the M like that. Always had a little hook at the bottom from her arthritis." Sarah Chin arrived within the hour, took one look at her own signature, and laughed bitterly. I was living in California when this was supposedly signed. I didn't even move here until 2 years later. The scope of the fraud was staggering. Bethany had forged at least 8 signatures to create a legal fiction that our properties had voluntarily joined her HOA. In reality, she'd manufactured consent through systematic document forgery. When someone uses forged documents to claim authority over real estate, it triggers multiple federal crimes: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and potentially racketeering. Diane's investigation had uncovered something even bigger. Those mineral rights weren't just theoretical. A 2019 geological survey had confirmed significant natural gas deposits under our entire development. The energy company's preliminary agreement was worth $12 million for full extraction rights. She wasn't just stealing houses. She was consolidating mineral rights that could make her filthy rich. Every forced sale gave her control over another piece of a multi-million-dollar puzzle. My grandmother's 2 acres weren't just sentimental value. They contained mineral rights potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rights that Bethany planned to steal through forged documents and systematic harassment. Harold's voice broke as he realized the full scope. "She's not just taking our homes, son. She's erasing our family's entire legacy for profit." But we had advantages Bethany didn't know about. Sarah's background in bank fraud investigation gave us expertise in document analysis. Harold's meticulous record-keeping had created a paper trail of harassment spanning 3 years. My security system had captured months of criminal activity. Most importantly, we now had evidence of federal crimes that would bring agencies with real power into our fight. The next 72 hours felt like organizing a military operation. My grandmother's kitchen became our command center. Her old wooden table buried under evidence folders, legal documents, and enough coffee cups to fuel a small army. Harold's grandson, Jake, arrived first, the pro bono attorney I'd heard about but never met. 35 years old, with the kind of sharp intelligence that came from handling property rights cases across 3 states. He spread out copies of Bethany's forged documents like crime scene photos. "This is federal territory now," he said. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud multiple government agencies. We're talking 20-year prison sentences if we can prove systematic intent." We printed hundreds of pages of evidence. Every security camera recording, every financial transaction, every forged signature blown up to poster size. Jake organized everything into a chronological timeline that told the story of organized crime masquerading as community management. Sarah's husband, Tom, arrived from Denver with a truck full of investigative journalism equipment. As a Denver Post reporter, he'd covered municipal corruption before, but nothing quite like this scope. "This isn't just local news," he said. "This is a story about systematic theft disguised as civic duty." Diane coordinated with federal agencies while we worked. The FBI had opened a mail fraud investigation based on those forged HOA documents. The state attorney general's office assigned a prosecutor to the real estate fraud case. Environmental crimes investigators wanted to pursue the unpermitted excavation charges. The beautiful thing about federal crimes is that local corruption can't protect you. When FBI agents show up with warrants, golf buddies and college roommates suddenly develop amnesia about their helpful relationships. We spent hours organizing evidence into multimedia presentations, security footage compiled into a devastating chronological timeline, financial records showing the money trail from forced sales directly into Bethany's accounts, expert handwriting analysis proving systematic forgery across multiple legal documents. Harold contributed 3 years of detailed documentation in careful handwriting. Every harassment incident recorded with dates, times, and witnesses. Sarah brought banking expertise that turned financial records into clear evidence of fraud. Word had spread through social media about our upcoming town hall meeting, and RSVPs were pouring in from across the county. 23 families confirmed attendance to share similar harassment stories. 3 other neighborhoods reported identical patterns involving Bethany's real estate company. Tom's media contacts were building a story that would reach statewide audiences. Channel 7's Jenny Morrison committed to live broadcast coverage. The Denver Post was preparing an expose on municipal corruption in mountain communities. Jake prepared criminal referral packages from multiple agencies. We're not just seeking civil remedies, he explained. We're documenting federal crimes that require prosecution. Professional surveyors confirmed the trench placement was entirely on my property, violating multiple county ordinances. Environmental engineers documented unpermitted earth disturbance across several properties. Banking experts traced illegal HOA fee collections through forged authorizations. My security system had become the prosecution's star witness. Months of footage showing systematic trespassing, property destruction, and harassment campaigns, audio recordings of criminal conspiracy discussions, digital timestamps that correlated perfectly with financial fraud patterns. But Bethany's desperation was escalating. Diane's surveillance had caught her attempting to flee the state after one final property acquisition. Her husband was transferring assets to offshore accounts. Emergency court orders had frozen their finances, but they were clearly preparing for the worst. The biggest mistake came that evening when Bethany thought she was having a private conversation with her husband in their driveway. Mountain air carries sound differently than city noise. Cleaner, sharper, with nowhere for secrets to hide. Once we get rid of these old families, we'll control $3 million in mineral rights, she said. The energy company deal goes through next month. Then we relocate to Costa Rica with enough money to disappear forever. She had confessed to the entire criminal conspiracy on tape, including plans to flee prosecution once the last original families were eliminated. Thursday morning arrived with mountain clarity that makes you believe justice is possible. But Bethany had one final card to play that nearly broke me completely. I woke to the rumbling of diesel engines surrounding my property like mechanized wolves. She had positioned construction equipment to create an impenetrable blockade around my driveway, claiming emergency waterline repair that would require 48 hours of access restriction. The timing was surgical. I was trapped on my own property, unable to attend the town hall meeting where 3 months of evidence would finally expose her criminal empire. Harold arrived at 8 a.m., leading a convoy of 30 pickup trucks filled with neighbors I'd never spoken to before. Sarah Chun had organized a social media campaign that brought families from across the county. Even people who'd never experienced HOA harassment understood that what happened to me could happen to anyone. Nobody traps a veteran on his own land, Harold announced, his weathered voice carrying the authority of someone who defended democracy in 2 wars. Move that equipment or we'll move it for you. The standoff lasted 20 minutes before county sheriff deputies arrived and determined that Bethany's emergency repair was actually unlawful obstruction of property access. The construction crew disappeared faster than mountain fog at sunrise. Meanwhile, Bethany was orchestrating her own counter-demonstration. She had hired supporters from other HOA developments, $200 each, to attend and paint me as a dangerous extremist threatening peaceful communities. Her hired crowd carried professionally printed signs reading "Stop Veteran Violence" and "Protect Our Families." Local news crews, filming her supporters, didn't realize they were documenting paid political theater. Tom's investigative journalism contacts uncovered the payment records, bank transfers showing exactly $200 paid to each concerned neighbor, creating evidence of fraud that would strengthen federal conspiracy charges. The drive to town hall felt like riding into battle. Jenny Morrison from Channel 7 had arranged helicopter coverage that filmed my journey from trapped property owner to community defender. The aerial footage of that earthen trench around my house would become the defining image of systematic property harassment. Bethany's final legal maneuver was attempting to suppress all security camera evidence through emergency court order. She claimed my cameras violated federal wiretapping laws and demanded sealed proceedings to protect trade secrets about mineral rights development. But Jake had anticipated this desperate move. "Your Honor," he told Judge Manning during the emergency hearing, "plaintiff seeks to suppress evidence of her own criminal activity under pretense of privacy protection. This court lacks jurisdiction over federal wiretapping charges. Plaintiff provides no legal basis for sealing proceedings about public mineral rights." The judge's golf relationship with Bethany's husband suddenly seemed less important when federal agencies were watching every decision for signs of corruption. By 6 p.m., the high school auditorium was packed beyond capacity. 280 people in a space designed for 200, with overflow crowds listening through outdoor speakers. 3 television news crews had set up for live broadcast coverage. FBI agents and state prosecutors sat in the front row like judicial executioners. Bethany arrived with private security and a public relations handler, still believing she could spin this disaster into victimhood. Her designer outfit and professional entourage contrasted sharply with the working families she'd spent years terrorizing. The murmur of anticipation fell silent as I entered to spontaneous applause. Mountain communities understand the difference between authentic neighbors and predatory outsiders. And tonight, that understanding would determine Bethany's fate. But her most revealing moment came during setup when she thought the microphones weren't active yet. Audio technicians had already begun recording, capturing her conversation with a PR handler about damage control strategies and exit planning. "If this goes badly, we implement the Costa Rica contingency immediately," Bethany's voice carried through the auditorium speakers. "The offshore accounts are already established." She had confessed to flight risk and hidden assets before the formal proceedings even began. Every law enforcement officer in the room suddenly paid closer attention. County Commissioner Rodriguez called the meeting to order, but everyone's eyes were on the front row, where FBI agent Patricia Henley and state prosecutor Michael Chong sat like silent judges. Behind them, Jenny Morrison's Channel 7 crew prepared for live broadcasts that would reach 340,000 viewers across Colorado. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, standing at the podium where my grandmother had once advocated for rural school funding. "I came to Pinedale seeking peace after military service. But I found a war in my own backyard." The 85-inch screen behind me came alive with my grandmother's original 1943 deed, showing her family's legitimate claim to land that predated any HOA by decades. The audience murmured as the timeline advanced through decades of peaceful mountain living to Bethany's arrival 3 years ago. Then the security footage began playing. Gasps echoed through the auditorium as people watched Bethany directing the trench excavation at dawn. Her voice crystal clear in the mountain air. "Make sure it's deep enough that he can't drive out. That should teach him to mess with us." That's not what happened. Bethany shouted from her seat, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, realizing she was making everything worse. The evidence presentation continued relentlessly. Financial documents displayed on a massive screen showed her real estate company's profits from forced sales, $340,000 in commissions from harassment-driven property transfers. The money trail connected every violation notice to eventual financial gain. But the smoking gun was the forged signature analysis. Handwriting expert Dr. Elizabeth Santos had prepared a devastating comparison showing my grandmother's authentic signature beside Bethany's crude forgery. The differences were so obvious that audience members started pointing and whispering before Dr. Santos even explained the technical analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Santos testified with clinical precision. These signatures were forged with 99.7% certainty. Whoever created these documents had no legal authority to incorporate this homeowners association. The room erupted in angry murmurs. 3 years of harassment, fines, and legal battles, all based on fraudulent paperwork that should never have been accepted by county officials. Harold's testimony brought the emotional stakes into focus. Standing at the podium with Margaret's Memorial Garden photos, his voice cracked as he described watching Bethany's crew destroy 30 years of carefully cultivated roses while he was buying groceries. She didn't just kill flowers, Harold said, tears flowing freely. She murdered my wife's memory for profit. Sarah Chan read a letter from her 8-year-old daughter. Dear town people, please don't let the mean lady make us move away. I like my swing set and my friends, and I promise we're not bothering anyone. 12 other families testified about identical harassment campaigns. The pattern was undeniable. Systematic targeting of original landowners through fraudulent legal processes designed to force below-market property sales. Then I played the audio recording that ended Bethany's criminal career. Once we eliminate these stubborn old families, we'll control $3 million in mineral rights. Bethany's voice filled the auditorium through professional sound equipment. The energy company deal goes through next month. Then we relocate to Costa Rica with enough money to disappear forever. The collective gasp was audible on live television. Bethany's face went white as she realized her private confession was being broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers across Colorado. This is all lies and manipulation, she screamed, standing up despite her lawyer's frantic attempts to silence her. This veteran used military training to wage psychological warfare against peaceful neighbors. But the security cameras had recorded her ordering my garden poisoned while claiming environmental protection. Audio surveillance had captured her bribing construction workers for false testimony. Financial records proved systematic fraud spanning multiple government agencies. FBI agent Henley stood up as Bethany attempted to leave the auditorium. Ma'am, you're under arrest for mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud government agencies, and racketeering under the RICO Act. The perp walk was broadcast live as Bethany was led out in handcuffs past cheering neighbors. Her final words were captured by every microphone in the room. You people don't understand what you've done. I was improving this community. The only thing you improved, I said into the microphone as police cars drove away, was our understanding of how criminals disguise theft as civic duty. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. County commissioners issued formal apologies. The HOA was dissolved by unanimous vote, replaced by a legitimate neighborhood association with rotating leadership and verified signatures. Justice had finally arrived in Pinedale, Colorado, and it came with handcuffs. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my grandmother's porch with morning coffee, listening to the sound of children playing freely in yards where they'd once been afraid to laugh too loudly. The trench is gone, filled with rich topsoil and planted with wildflowers that bloom brighter than any designer landscaping Bethany ever imagined. Justice moved swiftly once federal agencies took over. Bethany received 4 years in federal prison for mail fraud and racketeering. Her husband got 3 years for conspiracy and was permanently disbarred. Their construction company was dissolved. Equipment sold at auction to pay victim restitution totaling $7 million. The ripple effects reached further than anyone expected. Colorado passed Marcus Law, requiring verified signatures and independent oversight for all HOA formations. 23 other communities reported similar fraud investigations after our story went viral, leading to the largest property rights reform movement in state history. My workshop business exploded with customers from 6 states who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to support someone who'd fought back against corruption. The irony wasn't lost on me. Bethany's attempts to destroy my livelihood had actually made it more successful than ever. But the real healing happened in our community gardens. Harold transformed his wife's memorial roses into a neighborhood gathering space where families share vegetables and stories every Sunday evening. The scent of Margaret's heirloom roses mixed with fresh herbs creates an atmosphere of peace that would have made my grandmother smile. Sarah Chin's children organized the Eleanor Whitfield Memorial Scholarship for rural students studying sustainable agriculture. $50,000 raised through GoFundMe after our story reached national attention. The first recipient is a local high school senior planning agricultural engineering studies, the kind of young person who will keep mountain communities thriving for generations. The mineral rights that nearly destroyed us became our salvation. Instead of selling to energy companies, our neighborhood voted to establish a permanent conservation easement protecting 500 acres of pristine mountain habitat. Wildlife biologists now use our area for native species research, bringing educational tourism that supports local businesses without destroying the character we'd fought to preserve. 3 families who'd planned to move away from Bethany's harassment decided to stay and help rebuild. Property values increased 15% due to national media attention showcasing our strong community bonds. Turns out people want to live in neighborhoods where neighbors actually defend each other. The environmental restoration exceeded all expectations. Where Bethany's crew had poisoned my grandmother's garden, we planted heirloom varieties from seeds Eleanor had saved for decades. Those tomatoes, descended from Irish immigrants, now feed 5 families every summer, proving that some legacies can't be destroyed by corporate criminals. Netflix optioned our story for a limited series about property rights and community resistance. Jenny Morrison won a regional Emmy for investigative journalism. Tom's Denver Post expose triggered federal investigations into municipal corruption across 3 counties. But the sweetest victory is personal. I'm dating again. A local teacher who says she fell for a man brave enough to fight City Hall and win. My ex-wife called to apologize for doubting that moving to the mountains was the right choice. Even my teenage daughter admits that her old man might actually be kind of cool. Every morning I check security cameras that now record only deer crossing the property line and neighbors walking dogs on newly peaceful streets. The diesel exhaust and fierce sweat have been replaced by pine needles and morning frost, the way mountain mornings should smell. Harold stops by twice a week for coffee and chess, sharing stories about Margaret while planning next season's garden expansion. Sarah's kids play in yards where their parents once worried about anonymous complaints and harassment campaigns. The new neighborhood association meets monthly in my grandmother's kitchen, rotating leadership and making decisions by actual consensus rather than manufactured authority. We've established emergency funds for families facing legitimate hardships and created maintenance crews to help elderly neighbors with property upkeep. If you're dealing with HOA harassment or know someone trapped in similar situations, share this story and tag them. Sometimes people need to know they're not alone and that fighting back is possible. And if this story helped you understand the importance of community defense against corruption, hit that subscribe button. There are more battles being fought in neighborhoods across America. And every story shared makes predators like Bethany think twice before targeting their next victim. Together, we're proving that ordinary neighbors can defeat extraordinary criminals when they stand united. The mountains are peaceful again, and my grandmother's legacy lives on.